Okay, here's another one. So, I'm always trying to build value in using Matrix Dental Laboratory. That's the name of my laboratory. And in doing so, I have to do things which benefit both the patient and the doctor and our relationship. And one of those things is when I'm making partial dentures and have partial dentures made, I want to find a way to stabilize the teeth that I'm going to set on here once I have the frame fabricated. So let me show you what I do. You may be doing it already, but maybe you're not. And that is that I'm basically taking and I'm placing auto-polymerizing resin, that's tray resin, on the saddle areas in conjunction with the outline of the border of the saddles that are on the model. And then I'm thinning it out, and the reason I do that is so that when I set the teeth on the case for wax try-in, that I don't have wax falling off of the metal frame. In the past, or I should say in the early years of my career in dental technology, I was like most people and just put a block of wax on top of that metal saddle that was there, the meshwork, and then set some teeth on it, and I was forever getting back cases where the wax would, the whole segment would just plop off during the try-in. So I had to think of a way that would not fluster the doctors during that sequence and wouldn't fluster me trying to re-index it and do all the things that would have to happen in order to make it right for the next one. So what I did was I grabbed up some auto-polymerizing resin, and I like pink. Pink is the color of preference because it's biologic. And then what I did is I adapted on the saddles until they set up, okay, and just finger adapt it. And by the way, for you people who don't like auto-polymerizing resin because it tends to pull from the model as you're adapting, something to keep in mind is a little technique, a little trick that I learned from an old-time dentist years and years and years and years ago, which is to keep cool water running on that auto-polymerizing resin as you're adapting throughout the cure. What that does is it controls the heat, because what happens is with auto-polymerizing resin is that it gets extremely hot as it's curing because it cures by chemical reaction. I found that to be really beneficial when I'm adapting auto-polymerizing resin to bare edentulous models and adapting to make a big base plate. Why that and not the light cure, you might be asking? And nothing wrong with light cure, and in fact I use light cure from time to time on certain models. I like to have the flexibility of this material, of the auto-polymerizing resin, in this regard, that once you've adapted your resin to those mesh saddles, this is the underside of course, I want to make sure that when I go to boil out the case that I can lift those saddles off without anything impinging underneath of the mesh itself. Well, with the light cured resin, it never softens. So you always, unless you've taken, like I've done here, a carbide and you've ground down to the mesh on the bottom side to relieve those squares, it's difficult. It's a difficult proposition to take off with light cured. With the auto-polymerizing resin, it softens with heat. So while that is in the boil out tank for 12 to 15 minutes to soften, when I go to open the mold, these literally just pull right off. I do have to remove the squares under the square mesh so that it pulls off easy, but that's because it's flexible. And remember that the material that you're going to adapt to the saddles, it's while it's down and on the model, you want to make sure that when you go to pull it off, that it hasn't curled underneath the edge of the mesh, because then when you go to pull it off, especially with the light cured, it's brittle and it snaps, and then you got a piece lodged underneath your mesh. That's why if you're going to use this technique, I would recommend that you get auto-polymerizing tray resin. Anyways, back to the story. I grind. Before I even start setting teeth, I grind down and free up so there's no squares underneath that mesh, any place all the way around, trim the borders and make them nice and smooth so they don't cut the patient upon insertion. And then I'm ready to go, because now I can, this will be mounted first without the frame in place, of course, and then I'll place this on top, and then I can set my teeth, and when it's sent back to the doctor, he can try that in, knowing that the wax isn't going to soften around the frame because there's more than wax there. I've got this resin that's going to basically support the wax, and that's what I'm really looking to do here. And again, it's about building a reputation, building a sense of, you know, what makes one lab better than the other. And I've always said this from like 30 years ago. The difference between one lab and the other is that the details, the little things. The little things like this, where they don't have to worry about teeth popping off the saddles during try-in, the support of it, and sending back the insisting on a on another video I have, I talk about insisting on a base plate for edentulous quadrants. Like if I had this and they were going to take a bite registration prior, I'd make this out of all resin so they could put blocks on it and we could take a registration against edentulous quadrants. It's always about foresight, always looking ahead to see where will there be a problem, how will it affect our clients, and how can we eliminate it so that we build this reputation for making finer things. So anyway, this is the thrust of it. I just put these saddles on, then place the teeth on top for support, and so they won't pop off in the patient's mouth. Just 7 minutes long, just a little video here just to show you another thing that I do that's kind of cool, and maybe you can adapt it into your practice as well. Have a good day. Thanks for stopping by.